Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back to the shed. You've been here before, haven't you?
Yep.
Must have been.
When we delivered.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Bryn Wildish from the wonder that is Audient, and it's probably down to you that, or a very large part down to you, that this baby arrived in the first place, because we spent 3 glorious days together. It must have been, yes, it must have been the summer, because I remember being...
It was boiling
hot, but fabulous at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's here. It's been here for about 6 months. It arrived in December. It's now, again, a rather gloriously rainy July in the UK. And it's fabulous. Nothing more short of that. It's awesome.
Good. Excellent. Just what we wanted here.
It's the way I've been trying to work for a long time. But I have to be honest, there was a couple of things that I was either thinking, I'm not doing this right, or there's got to be a better way of doing this, or, you know, those sort of questions. Once you've got used to a new workflow, got used to a new way of working, way of thinking, way of kind of, you know, doing stuff, having been in the box solely for such a long time, I thought, well, we'd get you back, have a chat about some of the stuff, some of my silly or maybe not so silly questions, and just chat through the console.
Cool.
So let's start with auxiliaries. Now I know there's 12, but I can only see 6 parts.
Yeah.
Work that, discuss.
Well, there are 12 auxes and 12 dedicated outputs, but each of the console can access 6 at a time, and they're switchable in pairs.
So each channel.
Yeah. So, you know, a channel could be doing 1 to 6, or it could be doing 1 and 2, and then 11 and 12, and, you know, it's switchable in pairs.
Right.
So it's not like you've got 1 to 6 or 7 to 12. You kind of can switch across in the pairs.
And one of the things we were talking about pairs and stuff, was stereo auxiliaries. Now that is definitely something that comes from a DAW workflow.
Yeah.
I don't know of any analog console that gives you stereo auxiliaries.
Maybe some of the bigger broadcasty.
The super huge one, or a digital console.
For us mere mortals.
Yes, indeed. Short of spending mega money.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's a chunk of change, but it's not.
Well, they tend to be digital as well in a lot of respects.
Yes.
So, you know, it's similar, more analogous.
One of those,
to the DAW workflow.
Yeah. So in the DAW world, we've been very spoilt with stereo auxiliary sounds for reverbs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, one of my biggest kind of am I doing this right moments was definitely over the using 2 auxiliaries to send a stereo input to get stereo reverb from Bricasti.
Yeah.
Now, as I say, I think a lot of that comes back from this whole DAW stereo workflow thing, and probably not reading the manual for the Bricasti, to be totally honest, because, you know, I thought, well, it's got stereo inputs, therefore surely I should feed it with a stereo signal, but not necessarily the case.
It's not, in an ideal world, yes, but it's whether it's actually worth doing and whether returns mean of having to adjust, you know, 2 controls, a left and a right send, are worthwhile in the workflow.
Because obviously in a hard panned environment, we'll turn aux 1 up for left and aux 2 up for right.
Yeah.
But where you're trying to create a kind of a faux stereo image on 2 parts, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, well, the majority of effects, and I mean, you know, you always see that if something says it's a true stereo input, but even though something has a left and right input, doesn't mean it's always stereo anyway. A lot of them sum to mono internally and then feed a mono signal and then synthesize the stereo reverb. Now, the Bricasti doesn't do that, but a lot of things do.
Yeah.
So it's a case of whether having that dramatic left and right, as you say, if you're hard panning things and trying to get a specific effect of someone standing at one end of a hall or something like that, you'd want the true stereo. But in most instances, when we're talking, you know, between the kind of 10 to 2 panning, a mono feed is perfectly adequate.
Yeah, and it turned out that I hadn't read the manual of Bricasti, which we now have, and I've set it up on a mono input, and to be honest, we really couldn't hear much difference.
No. It's imperceivable. Just tiny things.
Again, I know it comes back to that whole, I think it's called aux pan follows master pan setting or preference in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And again, I've been using it like that for years and gone, well, I'm using twice as many auxiliaries as I need to. And
obviously in Pro Tools, the irrelevant DSP to create those auxes, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've fixed that one. That's good because now I only have to turn one pot to set reverb rather than turn two.
Yeah.
So you've saved me half as much time again.
There you go.
Work that one out.
Yeah. As you say, you weren't doing anything wrong. That was actually the right way of doing it, but it was an unnecessarily complex way of doing it for the returns you were getting, literal returns.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of returns or sends again, headphones. Now, I am probably one of the 2% of people in the world who like stereo headphones because of being a drummer and having that whole kind of the image in my ears as well as the image in my eyes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I've done that the same way using the two A and B.
Yep.
Foldback sends.
Yeah.
I thought, there might be a neat way of doing that or another way of doing it, but that if that's the way that...
No, it's as you say, if you're one of the 2%, the other 98% of the time, a mono headphone feed is perfectly adequate for people. As vocalists, for example, they'll generally have one can halfway off. If you start sending them stereo, they're only not going to be getting everything.
Yeah.
So having a mono send perfectly acceptable and very easy to set up. And then you've got the two that you can do simultaneously. If you've got someone in there tracking drums and someone else in here doing something, playing the bass along with them or something like that.
We had 8 people here the other day.
In here?
4 in here, 4 out on the veranda. They thought it was the best session ever because they had like a director's chair and a beer.
Oh, well.
And they were getting a suntan. So genuinely, they could use the phrase Studio 10. Unlike us poor mere mortals who were stuck inside driving the thing. I think that's the thing that I'm enjoying the most about it. It does feel like the centre of my studio world. It does feel like... I know we all talk about the fact that these days you don't have to have a console, you don't have to have a tactile surface for it to be a studio.
Yeah.
But there is something quite nice about walking through those doors in the morning and seeing it and going, yeah, recording studio. And maybe that's the 40-year-old in me that's going old school.
No, there's something just, as you know, that moment where you just get even a session and you spread it out across and you just push up the faders. It's very quick to get things going in a workflow. You just, there's that. You're not kind of rooting through trying to figure out where things are. And, if you do that little bit of prep work before, it's just, boom, there's your mix. Oh, that's too loud, that's too quiet. Or just a little bit, and you're halfway there before you know. Yeah.
So I think my workflow, my mixdown workflow is probably a little bit different to a lot of people the way they would use any console, or certainly this console. I'm using 1 through 12 as my drum returns. Pretty much then 13 to 24, I'm then almost subgroup mixing, or summing. I'm using the console as a summing console.
So you got all your BVs combined.
Yeah. Keys, guitars. But what I'm also doing, because I have the rather lovely Antelope Orion HD32 HD, I've got 32 outputs, and I'm spreading 6 of those across my subgroups using the subgroup insert returns.
Yep. So that's just coming in at a line level.
Yeah.
Straight out. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. And that's giving me 30 faders of mixing.
Yeah. 32, but you're using another 2 in another way.
Yes, I'm using my final 2 as my... I'm not using the last 2 subgroups at all. I'm using channels 31 and 32 from the Orion as my tape return monitor path, which is coming up into the control room section.
Yep.
And people go, well, that's confusing. And I'm like, no, it's not, because I can monitor what's going back to what we used to call the mix, or back to tape.
Yep.
And it works really well, because I'm actually hearing the final signal.
Yes, that's in an ideal world. When you were doing that final layoff to the 2-track, you'd want to hear exactly what's going down to 2 to make sure there's nothing, no distortion, no clicks, no weird things happening, crackles and pops. So that's exactly what you're doing there. You're just treating the last 2 channels of the DAW or the Orion as a 2-track return. In effect, treating it as a separate machine. And it's not an uncommon way of doing it. It is exactly the way I would personally do it. So you stuff that completely.
In another world, maybe in a few years' time when I've mortgaged the house again, I might look at buying some kind of high-end A to D to go back into the digital inputs on this thing to give me as clean a possible signal back to tape without using should we say, lesser A to D converters, should we say.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to lay, you know, if you've got something that's got a little bit more headroom or that quality issue.
Yeah, I'd love a Lavery Gold, but
Yeah.
currently, say I have a house, you know, little things.
Yeah.
Little things like children, you know, that need shoes and food and
Pesky things.
college. So it's working. I think we've honed, or I've honed my workflow and my system to where everything is really, really nice and tight and simple. But you've got a neat trick that we're going to sort of show you now to just up the game on the mixes a little bit.
Yeah.
And on certain tracks, could just lift things forward. Do you want to talk about your kind of rerouting cleverness?
Yeah. Well, the other thing I'd say with regards to those 6 channels coming in there on the returns, what you could do is bring them in the line inputs on the short fader and then route them to the first 6 buses via the routing matrix. Then you've got the input set of points on there.
That's true.
If you did it that way, that enables you to add some stereo processing across maybe the keys or guitars and add some there as you know, as and when the outboard grows, etc. So that's one other thing. But using a similar kind of idea, what I suggested and we just tried.
Let's dive in.
Was over on the patch bay, which as you correctly said was, you know, a very worthwhile option to take. We've taken the tape output here. Now, by coming out of the playback output and not in the tape in, we've multed it, so it's duplicating the signal. Yeah.
So it's basically going from the playback output point
so that's
back in to the line input.
To the line input. Now, one of the interesting things about the line input at the desk is that it actually is padded down and goes into the mic pre, because the line input is on the mic pre channel as opposed to the tape return, which is on its own line level input.
Right.
So what you're doing is you're going through those lovely discrete transistor circuits again to add a little bit more colour and warmth. As we just tried with the drums, and particularly as you noticed on the snare drum, it just adds that little bit more.
It really pops, yeah. It's just and also we can drive the gain a bit harder to get some grit, and then balance the two. Balance the DAW return against the, I won't call it the fed back return, but it wouldn't be far off the truth to call it that.
Yeah, well, if we've got both, I mean, here the snare top. If we've got that in the mix and the short fader in the mix, so this is coming back through the mic pre, and it's the same signal, you can blend between them. So if you want a little bit more, oomph, shall we say, there you can bring that one up and that one down and just mix between the two. If you had different compression on the return on the channels, for example, you could use that as a way of doing parallel compression on a channel basis.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah, so you can blend between the compressed and uncompressed, so you're keeping it on a channel level as opposed to being, having to do it and multi it and put it on a separate channel. You're doing it inside of one channel.
I think, say, from your suggestions and advice and from the guys at Audient, the best thing I bought was the patch bay. The best optional extra, should we say, was the patch bay.
Yeah, the take up on the patch bays is very high. I think it's probably about 70% of people take it without.
Purely because, so the way I'm working and the amount of gear that comes through the studio for my own gear lust moments and for the moments of demoing stuff and reviewing stuff for Project Expert, it made a lot of sense. And actually, someone actually asked me the other day, what does all this lot mean? What is this extra row of tape along the bottom? And it's because I'm often using 2 different audio interface systems. 99% of the time, or should we say 80% of the time, I'm using the Orion 32HD. But sometimes I'm using the Apollos. So I'm using the Apollo 16, first 16 channels, and then I'm using the Apollo 8P to give me an extra 8 channels output, 8 channels of input. And they said, but it doesn't have 8 channels of output. I said, well, there's a tutorial to follow of how I did it using some cleverness with inside the Apollo console. So that's one to look out for. But of course, the other nice thing about the patch bay is it allows me to use all my lovely outboard. And it allows me to keep reconfiguring it and changing it and using it for different things. There's some other reviews coming of some gear that also enable that really, really well. I'm not going to give too much away yet. But the 1176 style compressors on the kick, so the warm audio, I think the WA76s. I've got a real 1176 on the snare, which sounds awesome. The 2 warm Pultec style EQs sound great on the overheads. I'm using the DBXs on the overheads. I want to get a few more of those and actually put them on toms as well, because I think the DBXs will sound amazing.
Yeah.
Most people say, what, no distressor? I said, yeah, but I really like the Arouser plugin. The Dave and the guys at Empirical Labs have done an amazing job on that thing. Again, review to follow.
Here's another thing you could try.
What's that?
Well, you've got both systems there. You can strap the outboard effects in real time on the Apollos, can't you?
Yes.
Why not use those as insert effects?
Ooh.
You've got inserts on all the channel paths, the fader, short and long fader, and on the subs there. So you've got 56 inserts to play with. Just set up hardware effects.
Ooh. I sense another video coming on. I sense...
Lucky I don't live too far away.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the cool things about this console and about actually this kind of hybrid workflow, this hybrid system that I'm running, is there are so many options.
Yeah.
I've got now, within 6 months, which let's face it is not that long in the grand scheme of things, a system that I'm really enjoying, really loving working with, and works so well. But there are so many other options. Say hardware effects with virtual effects. Hardware virtual effects. Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
That's definitely one to investigate. Yeah. Bryn, thank you, sir.
Pleasure, as ever.
My wife doesn't thank you for this thing, but I do. It's a joy to drive. It's a joy to sit there and actually be in command of my own little audio world.
Yeah, it's nice when you walk in, just push those faders up, and it's like, I'm in control. It's all in front of you.
I'd never go as far as to say I'm in control, but hey. Bryn, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime.
And yeah, thanks to the guys and the team at Audient for building a fantastic piece of kit.